All right, perfect. Let's get right into it. Again, my name is Nkendil Muwaji Bell, and I am going to be your trainer today. I am a digital marketing and digital transformation expert. I run a company called Future Software Resources Limited. FutureSoft is an IT service company. We specialize on digital marketing, e-learning, and IT consultancy with a core focus on digital transformation. And today we're here to basically host a masterclass focused on accelerating your digital transformation journey, which is specifically for board members, executives, as well as business owners. So the session is going to be in three parts. We're going to start with a quick and short discussion with a renowned innovation and digital transformation expert from the UK, who happens to be my sister as well. She's worked in technology for many years and is really working on very cutting edge things and projects. And she's formerly worked with Dell Technologies and now works with a financial service company as their global innovation manager. So she's the right person to sort of set the scene and get us started and start thinking about what digital transformation means to us and what type of journey we should be looking at. After that, we'll dive right into the masterclass, which is structured in representation style. Please feel free to put your questions in the comment box. So Zoom has a chat functionality where you can just put in your questions and you're able to just ask as we go along. I'm going to stop and sort of pause for a couple of questions and answer them. If I'm not able to go through all of the questions and answer all of the questions sufficiently, I've got John here from my team who's also collating all of the questions so that I can make sure that I share a write-up or an email with answers to those questions later on. And once I'm done with my presentation, I am going to open the floor for more questions, and hopefully we'll have some time to really dig in and get some more information from you guys and questions and key challenges that you're dealing with so that I can sort of help and address those. So we're just gonna start with welcoming Nkiru. One second. Just need to find Nkiru and unmute her. All right, welcome Nkiru. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, good morning, everyone, or nearly good afternoon. And thanks, Nkendil, for inviting me to this session. I'm excited to hear all about it.
Yeah, so I mean, you and I talk about digital transformation all the time, and it's almost like our dinner table conversation, which is probably odd for a lot of people. But given the type of family we come from, where our dad is like tech embodied, and we're three girls, we all work in tech. I think this is pretty normal. So I would like you to sort of share with our audience today, what the pillars of digital transformation are, because I think that digital transformation is often pigeonholed into some type of IT service or IT project, right? Which it is not. IT and digital transformation are two very, very separate things. So if you can just shed some light on, to you, what the pillars of digital transformation are.
Sure thing, and thanks for the introduction. As mentioned by Nkendil early on, I've worked around 7+ years within the technical vendor capacity and have mainly focused around emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud technologies, IoT, and the likes, working for mostly FTSE 100 and FTSE 250 companies, really helping and advising them on their digital transformation journey. As you've rightly pointed out, I think what has stuck out the most is that fundamentally a lot of individuals still don't understand, and a lot of organizations, what is digital transformation. And by no means, I think I like to start with what's out of scope and the things that are potentially not considered as digital transformation. digital transformation is not just a fancy, nice application or product that you have on your phone. Digital transformation is really the core of any business, and ultimately a strategy of how are you going to remain competitive in a world that is digitized. Now, when we talk about pillars, we really see this in twofold when we talk about it from a tech vendor perspective. And for those who are thinking, okay, who's like a tech vendor? Think about the Dell Technologies, the IBMs, the Microsoft of the world, right? And it's really twofold. One, it's the front end, which is what customer experience are you currently delivering and how are you delivering that through digital mediums? So that also includes how am I marketing my products from a digital platform perspective? And then really thinking about, okay, how am I developing products that are fit for the digital world today? Because like it or not, the majority of your product is going to have some sort of digital angle, even when you're working in a capacity of having physical activity, i.e. you could be in brick and mortar, such as, the hotel industry or real estate. But ultimately, for you to have a competitive edge, you will still need to have a digital strategy front end. Now, it gets a bit more complicated because front end is not the only thing that matters. It's very nice if you're having all the vision and ambition to execute on a digital front end strategy. But if your back end is fundamentally based on legacy technology and is not fit for purpose, you won't be able to even execute on that vision. So really starting to look at the back-end technologies and understanding your infrastructure and architecture strategy when it comes to digital. And that's where we have the pieces around cloud technology, the likes of APIs and data analytics come in as a fundamental structure.
Okay, perfect. I think that gives a really good overview. So are there some specific emerging technologies that executives should be sort of aware of and also looking out for and finding ways to incorporate these into their businesses?
Definitely. And, I think one can get lost in the sea of possibilities when it comes to emerging technologies and technology in general. But I'll start from the back end. I think on the back end, the kind of three areas that all executives should pay most attention to and be investing resource, time and money into is one, cloud. Ultimately, cloud is not just a place where you might be hosting something in terms of data, but it's an actual strategy where you're looking at how am I digitizing my applications and how am I making them, cloud native so that they can operate in any type of environment. The second one is really thinking about your data strategy. Lo and behold, it still escapes me that in year 2020, a lot of organizations do not have a data strategy. In fact, I heard a wonderful quote this morning from somebody who said, our data lake is like Finland, a land of many lakes. That should not be a positive thing when you're thinking about what is your data strategy. So actually really understanding, how can I leverage my data, not only to gain insights from my customers, but how can I use it to develop new products and more importantly, actually develop a resilient business strategy. And then the last one, which, I think has become more and more prominent within this discussion, are APIs. Now, application programming interfaces are the backbone of what actually we're able to do when it comes with data transfers within that architecture environment. Now, in Europe, we've moved towards open banking, right, possibility, which means that if you are a HSBC or a Barclays and you have the same customer, which might be in Kiro, you can actually find a way to anonymize this data, maybe by some other things like, my age, my date of birth, etc., and overlay this data even though you're in disparate organizations. And this way you have a far stronger view into who is in Kiro and what does she care about. And this same logic, every type of application you might be going into, the Googles of the world, the Ubers of the world, they're all using this strategy in order to overlay data through APIs. So APIs are definitely the foundation, but also what APIs have managed to do, they've managed to help standardize data processing and data transferring so that actually your business does not need to build everything from scratch. And this is the really exciting thing that every single, I think, executive needs to really think about, is that APIs are your best friend when you're thinking about transforming. And Cam, are you still there?
Yes, perfect. The screen froze for a little bit. I think my connection might be playing tricks. Okay, so I mean, I love the you know, sort of key strategies that you mentioned, cloud, data, and you know, APIs, and you know, especially for APIs, I think that for the African continent, there are so many opportunities around APIs. And if we look at banks like EcoBank, who have just opened their APIs in 33 countries to fintechs and other service providers to integrate all their vendors and share information, you know, we know that this is really where the trends are going, you know, and that's what we're seeing. So you mentioned one thing, which was, you know, a resilience strategy. We're in very unprecedented times at the moment where, you know, a lot of people are very scared, and because things are very uncertain for businesses, a lot of businesses have calculated how long their cash flow can take them, and you know, it's not looking that good. So how can business owners, C-level executive board members really maximize this time of this pandemic to start thinking and reviewing strategies and looking at how do we reposition, right? How do we make our business more resilient? How do we need to pivot? Do we need to add new services? Are there products that we want to add? You know, what are really the things that we, you know, should be looking at in order to make our businesses more resilient in the future, and also making sure that, you know, if a scenario like this happens again, we're prepared for it, and you know, it would be easy for us to quickly switch to working remotely, because even for big organizations globally, we've seen that there are still issues when suddenly your entire workforce is remote, as opposed to a couple of people within the workforce.
Definitely, and these are 100% unprecedented times, I think, for everybody, everywhere globally. Make no mistake, no matter how developed your infrastructure from a, you know, maybe local governmental perspective is, we're all definitely feeling that same pain, maybe in different parts of our respective countries. But if you're looking at more from a you know, organizational point of view, those companies that are still doing very well, and those companies who have a very strategic edge, are in fact those who have had a very resilient and inherently digital first strategy. And the Amazons, the Netflix, you know, the recent Microsoft kind of digitized strategies, and the likes of other type of tech vendors who are, you know, can operate their whole business over digital platforms. The banks in some ways are definitely struggling because they're having to, you know, front load some of the risk that is now, you know, faced for their business in terms of, you know, they have customers, whether it's corporate customers or consumer customers, that are now in dire need of liquidity and cash flow. But ultimately, you know, those companies who have a very strong digital strategy are the ones who are finding it easier to pivot into different parts of how do I run my business, even when I cannot see my customers in person, potentially service my customers in person, right? And I'd like to take some examples. It's like, in terms of, if you're looking at, for instance, the tech vendors, it's like formerly you'd maybe have to send an engineer on site, right, to do that data upgrade or etc. Nowadays, everything is pretty much done through digital channels where you can just create software to take control of that data center and upgrade it. Or, you know, for example, if there's a bug, or in fact, even if you have a hack, there's a way where you can actually facilitate doing that upgrade or that servicing of your customer digitally. And that's really putting the heart of what if scenarios at the core of it. Other companies, we talk about, Amazon. Now, yes, Amazon technically from a website perspective, you think, well, they don't have any problems, to operate, but actually think about what is really at the back end of Amazon. It is logistics at its core, but logistics have actually managed to, through digital, because they have that front end, right, which is ultimately your application and your web interface, and a very digital first strategy in terms of how do you interact with your consumers through specialized content, they've been able to still service through logistics, because now they're actually seeing a pivot in terms of maybe people don't just need, your usual things that you may order off Amazon. I don't know, maybe you're ordering a toy for your son or so. But actually now people are saying, okay, I actually need pharmaceuticals. I actually need certain things that I can't get in the supermarket anymore. In fact, very strangely, we've seen a complete uptake of equipment in the UK when it comes to sports equipment. You can literally not find a dumbbell on Amazon anymore because they've all been sold out. Same with any type of resistance bands, etc. So you're seeing that consumer want or need shift completely, but haven't kind of really analyzed the trends and being able to execute on regardless. Amazon has been able to pivot. And in tech, we are true believers that any type of company can be able to do that shift and have that strategy in place, no matter of whether or not the core of your business is brick and mortar. And we're seeing this by actually understanding that the wealth of what we give to our clients is fundamentally the one-to-one interaction. So you leading your business and your employees into engaging with your client base is the most powerful interaction you can have. And in fact, when you're able to gather data digitally from those clients, you're going to be better informed as to what is it that they're seeking out, what are their pain points, and then develop products that is truly a need for them during these times versus something you're pushing down their throat.
Okay, perfect. I think, I really gained a lot from that, and also one of my favorite companies that, really has a digital first strategy is Disney. 30% of their revenue comes from their theme parks, which are now closed. But what did Disney do in terms of answering to, the situation? They pushed out Disney Plus all the way across Europe and the UK, which was not necessarily in the plan at that point, right? But this is how they're going to make up for their revenue. Their shares are coming back up. And if last year I read the A Ride of a Lifetime by Robert Iger, who was the Disney CEO for 17 years. And you can really see that he positioned that company in a very strategic manner. So obviously also leadership and management and the board are key, strategic drivers of digital transformation, So I want to ask, what are the key roadblocks that you've sort of seen when you've worked with these big clients on your digital transformation strategies?
Definitely. And before I answer that question, actually, something comes to mind that we talked about the other day, which is around a very real example of being in Lagos and now being on lockdown and thinking, okay, I may not be able to get to the supermarket at all times. And you have these different brands who are offering to deliver goods to you. But you told me about the experience of actually logging into one of those sites and only having something odd like 40 products that were definitely not anything you wanted, and then having a terrible user experience because the website was actually not even really intuitive and it didn't really look like you should even trust this website, and you had to call separately to do a payment. And this is just the inherent example of where that company is not ready to pivot during a digital, where it's a digital only interface with the customer, and they will feel a lot of pain point. Now, you shouldn't need to wait for such a colossal thing like this pandemic to happen for you to think about digital strategy and like a what if scenario. That should be your status quo mindset in any given time, because you don't ever know as a business what might happen, right? So I think just leading on to that and to your question is something that's been definitely a trend within this environment of working with clients from all different sides of industry angles, is that there is a consistent pattern, which is around that if you do not have the right kind of vision and mindset within your board and also within your executive level to really take digital transformation serious and embed it as part of your strategy, you're going to struggle to get anything done. Because one and foremost is the individuals who work as part of that company follow a culture and a vision. And that needs to be led by the front. And you need to always have an example of that by having executives and board members who are at least taking the effort and time to understand what these things mean for their business. And more importantly, to understand how they can drive business outcome and value. Now, that's one side of it. And the second side of it is it's all well and good when you have that vision and strategy, but you must importantly actually embed that into, again, the culture and the change management of the individuals working as part of that same company by upskilling them, by bringing them on that journey. Because you can't walk in one day being like, hey, by the way, we're going to build an artificial intelligence strategy and have all this great data, and you don't have a single data scientist on your team. That's just not going to work. And you're going to probably scare a lot of people in your organization because they will feel that they're not able to deliver on value for that company. And what great talent inherently cares about is doing a great job and being able to contribute. So you need to give them the opportunity by giving them right development in order to do that. So that's probably one of the major things we've seen across the industries, and where, digital transformation at this point in time, you have so many vendors, you have so many consultancies, you have so many services which will help you through that journey. But if you don't inherently have the intention to do so, or the right people with the right mindset, you are going to fail. And we've seen this over and over again, and when you have individuals as part of kind of your executive strategy team that says, oh no, we don't need to change. Oh no, we don't need to build a new product. Oh no, why does that matter? Well, it matters because the likes of BlackBerry, and Blockbusters and Kodak, they were all once very successful companies as FTSE 100. You know where they are today? They're non-existent. They're dead. So the same thing is real time happening. You may not realize it or may not be, conscious to it, but the reality is if you're not transforming your business with a digital first strategy embedded into your ecosystem, you're going to most likely not have a business in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, Toys R Us is another example, right? They didn't go online, and Amazon started selling more toys than Toys R Us, which, I mean, is crazy. And I think that the thing is that it creeps up on you, right? Like you said, you might not actually realize as it's happening. And, then suddenly your balance sheet is saying you're not doing well anymore, and you can't really pinpoint what it is that is really, doing that. And what I hear a lot when I talk to clients in Nigeria is, oh, Nigeria is not ready yet. Oh, the consumer is not ready. But then a challenger brand comes in and does exactly what, we were suggesting.
Exactly. And I think
jump on it. And, then you suddenly are like, oh my God, we should have done this, right? And like you said, supermarkets should not have waited till there was a pandemic to invest in online platforms and e-commerce, right? They should have built those pipelines and built those channels out and integrated payment gateways, made sure they had their logistics set up, because there would have been consumers who would have used those services, right? So I think that, there's really a lot for boards and for C-level executives to really learn when it comes to, seeing the signs, seeing the writing on the wall. So my last question to you is, are there any books or resources that you can recommend for our listeners and viewers?
Definitely. I think, first of all, the internet is your friend at all times. There's literally nothing you can't find when it comes to, any type of resources. So that goes for podcasts, right? There's so many podcasts out there that you can listen to that speak so much around digital transformation, especially at executive strategy level. If you're looking at more like product design and developing new products and customer experience, you have those type of podcasts. but also audiobooks. I think audiobooks, if you're not an avid reader or don't have the time to read, while you're maybe doing things at home, or even while you're, cooking for your family, or whatever it is that you need to get done at home during these times, you can actually listen to that podcast or audiobook that will really help you inform, right? Other parts are, there are many free courses that you can share with your teams, but also take yourself. I always say you have to eat your own dog food, in the sense of don't advise somebody else to do something that you haven't done yourself. So things like Coursera, but also LinkedIn Learnings, those are very practical tool sets that you can leverage in order to upskill yourself and others. But ultimately, any field that you want to deep dive in, there's enough resources online that you can definitely, take a stance on. And, my advice is just take it bite size. No one's expecting anybody to be a digital transformation expert in the next hour. But I do really believe if you can carve out 30 to 45 minutes every day, or at least every 2 days or so, even if it's once a week, you're going to be smarter in a couple of months than you were not doing it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think this is a subject that we can't run away from. It's a subject that we all have to embrace, and we all have to become experts in, because this is where the world is going. So before we let you go, there is a question from Abiola Adekoya here asking, what front-end emerging technology should we be focusing on? So you spoke a lot about the back-end technology. So I think for her, it was important to also know what are the front-end technologies.
Right, great. I mean, front-end technologies, I think, are very much determined by what your business is. But one or two areas that I think are the ones that are a no-brainer for every organization is one, how are you actually engaging with your clients real time? So that means what's your social media strategy? What is your digital content strategy? i.e., are you sending out, specialized newsletters specifically, or do you have targeted campaigns? Do you understand your customer needs? And there are many platforms such as other, of course, Instagram, but also LinkedIn, Facebook, etc., which you can use in order to target those customers and really propagate your business strategy. Customers, everyone is online. Anybody who tells you, yeah, but my customers aren't really on Instagram, they're on Instagram, I assure you. They are on Instagram, they are on LinkedIn. It's just about, do you have the right information to target them and to find them? I think the other one is really around that front end is your product experience. We all love the brands that have now been like the thought leaders over the last 10 years. Again, sounding like a broken record, but the Ubers, Airbnbs, you name it, right? Also Microsoft, Apple, I mean, you name it. Those are the brands that we celebrate nearly at every turn when we talk about digital. So what have we learned from them? We've learned that we love intuitive design and we love things that are simple yet high end. So think about that. Is your product up to that level? And if it isn't, why isn't it? To me, it's just because you haven't really sat down and really thought about how to pivot that. So to me, that's a big product strategy of thinking about, how do I use tooling in order to start to develop that? A couple of really good books around that are, for instance, like The Lean Startup. But you can also have a look at a tool called, which you can find online on any type of product development website, Jobs to be Done. They're basically listing out the jobs to be done for your customers, and that way you build product. You can have a look also at Value Proposition Canvas and Business Model Canvas. They're all part of kind of a lean product development approach. That is, if you're looking at kind of the top key startups, but also bigger players that have emerged over the last 10 years, these are all the tools that they've employed. Literally, like for like, being on client side, this is the only thing we're preaching day in, day out. It's like, find a way to cut out the waste and identify the pain, solve for the pain for your customer, and then deliver an amazing experience when it comes to your customer experience. Link it to, if you go into a bank today, how would you like to be served? If you go into a supermarket today, how would you like to be served? Always think about it starts with the individual. Do not come up with super fluffy and big processes that just add, friction to the process. Actually, simple is far better when it comes to customer experience.
Yeah, I completely agree. And with that, I would like to say a big thank you to you. So we're going to go over to my presentation.
Thanks so much.
And if there are any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, and I'll answer them as we go along. So I'm going to share my screen now. All right. So I'm going to. I hope everybody can see my slides. So I'm going to start taking us through our actual topic, right? And I hope that the sort of like setting the scene and hearing it from another digital transformation expert that is doing this in the UK and has worked with really big brands, has helped you sort of get into the right mind frame and ready to really learn. So we're going to start with an overview. So the overview is basically focused on, just taking you through what we're going to talk about today. And every business that began before the boom of the internet now faces the same challenge: how to transform to compete in a digital economy, right? So if this is you, and even if you were not, founded before the boom of the internet, I think this is still a very relevant topic, because even innovative companies like Amazon are continuously optimizing their digital strategies. So today we're going to talk about the introduction to digital transformation. We're going to sort of quickly go through definitions. We're going to look at reasons to accelerate your journey, key pillars of digital transformation. We're going to look at clear winners in the digital age, technologies that are actually driving the digital transformation. And then we're going to really look at driving your digital transformation journey, right? So for me, it's really important to understand what type of digital transformation persona are you, right? And then what role does the board play? What role do C-level executives play? What role should a business owner play? And what role should a consultant play? I think these are really, really key to understand, so that you also understand the role that you're supposed to play in this entire journey. After that, we're going to go through a digital transformation checklist, and then we're going to talk about points of failure. I always like to sort of look at things from reverse, right? What are the biggest things that can make me fail? Because then I can eliminate those things and sort of solve for making sure that I don't fail at those things. And that way you have a higher chance of actually being successful, right? So we're going to talk about the lack of support from the top. We're going to talk about change management. We're going to talk about skimping on the budget. We're going to talk about the lack of local technical support, lack of skilled staff, ignoring data, the lack of process documentation, not having any business continuity, planning, and insufficient security. So Aaron Levy said, the last 10 years have been about changing the way people do work. The next 10 years will be about transforming your business. And I couldn't agree more. So my favorite two definitions of digital transformation are as follows. Digital transformation is the process of using digital technologies to create new or modify existing business processes, culture, and customer experiences to meet changing business and market requirements. And the second one is digital transformation is turning a business into a 21st century organization that is strategically driven by technology and data and focuses on innovation at the intersection of technology and human behavior. And I think I like the second one better than the first one, even though both of them are very, very apt and very, very important. What I like about the second one is that it talks about the intersection of technology and human behavior. And like I mentioned at the beginning, digital transformation is not IT, right? So we all also have to start shifting how we look at things. And when I read the sort of feedback that I got on the sign-up forms, a lot of people are still, thinking about digital transformation as something that is a technology function and should be handled by their CIO or CTO, right? As opposed to something that is a strategic business driver and needs to be integrated into your business strategy. Now, here are some reasons why you have to accelerate your journey, right? So if you're already on the journey, this is the time to accelerate. If you haven't started, this is the time to double accelerate and actually get started, right? So digital as a resilience strategy, and Kira already touched on this, right? There's an ongoing pandemic and it's forced us all to sort of rethink the strategies and accelerate our digital transformation. And, you know, I think the one positive of COVID is that it's a great diagnostic tool. And it's basically helped us really and helped the world to really look at what are the major gaps, right? And obviously, for this purpose, what are the major gaps in technology and our service delivery, right? If your business had to close down because you were no longer able to service your customers, because you couldn't go remote, because there were too many roadblocks and issues and you had too much friction with being able to service your customers and deliver your services or products, then you should really start thinking about, you know, how do I change these things? How do I address those roadblocks, and how do I invest more into my digital in order to ensure that, you know, the business becomes more resilient, and if there is a similar situation, we're actually ready for it. Now, Kira also mentioned something around consumer culture that is changing, and she gave an example of people suddenly buying exercise equipment on Amazon, right? These are things that, you know, we're definitely going to keep seeing. As more and more customers get used to buying things online, if your business is not online, you will get left behind, right? As more people are getting used to working from home, doing Zoom meetings, experiences that they haven't maybe had before, at least not at this level, they will start rethinking training. They will start rethinking, you know, even client meetings, right? Why should I sit in traffic for an hour coming to a client meeting if we can use Zoom, right? And everybody's now used to Zoom, so more people will be open to actually having the meeting on Zoom, right? Digital marketing strategies are also really, really important. And also, like Nkiru mentioned, really building an amazing customer experience, right? Digital marketing, a lot of the time is looked at, oh, but that's marketing. But the truth is that digital marketing and digital transformation, they're like twin sisters or twin brothers, right? One can't go without the other, because if you're not really pushing out your product, right, in simple and innovative ways, then you're not going to be able to actually reach your consumer, because your consumer is becoming more and more digital first, which means that you also have to see, where do I get my consumer? How do I connect with my consumer properly? And then the third point is that the challengers are here, right? So brand challengers are disrupting more and more industries. It's the order of the day, and established brands have to accelerate their digital transformation in order to keep up, right? And if we look at industries where this has happened, you know, where Uber has completely disrupted how we think about transportation, right? And by disrupting how we think about transportation, it's disrupted the consumer culture, right? Nobody would now say, oh, let me walk to the, I don't know, my estate gate and wait for a yellow cab and flag it, right? Nobody would do that. You would sit in your house until the cab is done, the Uber is there, or your Bolt, or whatever you're using, and you would get into it. This is disruption at its finest. And this is an example that has touched everybody's life, you know, whether you use Uber here or you use Uber when you travel, it has just made transportation and the way we think about it so much easier. So these are the reasons to really start thinking about accelerating your journey. Now, what are the key pillars of digital transformation? One is customers. So digital allows for co-creation and a two-way communication. So traditional, you know, sort of marketing and traditional communication with customers was always very much the brand telling the customer, this is what we have for you, so come and buy it, this is how much it is, and, you know, that was it. But now you can actually co-create products with your customers, and we've seen this in many, many industries where fashion designers and shoe designers put up patterns before they produce them and allow customers to choose the designs and patterns that they really, really like in order to actually meet the demand. And they're using digital channels to do that. they're also leveraging customer networks and really investing in the customer experience. And when we talk about customer experience, it's really all the touch points that the customer is going to encounter on their journey, right? So it can be your website, it can be your social media channels, it could be your email newsletter, it could be your physical store, it could be a third party selling your product. So there are many, many different touch points that you really have to sort of think about, right? Then there's competition. So Nkiru mentioned the network economy, and she mentioned APIs and sort of talked a little bit around the benefits of sharing data and resources with everyone. So in the digital economy, collaboration and partnerships are key. And that includes collaboration and partnerships with your rivals and your competitors, right? So the tables have turned, and there are new opportunities and new ways of doing business. And of course, data. Data is really, really important because it allows you to enhance your customer experience. It allows you to have conversion-driven marketing. It allows you to effectively cross-sell. It allows you to make data-driven decisions. It allows you to hyper-personalize the experience, right? Where one consumer will get specific communication and another consumer who has different buying habits and who has a different target background would get different communication. And it also allows you to optimize your processes, because if you're really collecting data at every single point, you will see where the friction is, and it will allow you to really take the friction out, which is really the key of digital transformation. Number 4 is innovation. So we have rapid prototyping, and that really has to become the order of the day. You have to fail fast and you have to keep innovating. So don't, waste 18 months to go to market. Push out your MVP, get it tested, get feedback, and keep sort of, iterating as you go along and improve the user experience. Really pull your customers into that journey and let them give feedback that can help you co-create, right? This is really, really important. And also allows you to deeply embed innovation in your culture, because you're now having both your customers and your employees constantly talking about, how do we make this product better? What are the friction points? So you have much more engagement between employees and customers. And at some point, innovation now becomes your company culture and also is embedded in your organizational DNA, which is really, really important. The 5th pillar of digital transformation is value. So you really have to start thinking about how do you adapt your value proposition in a world that is ever changing, in terms of consumer needs, consumer behaviors, and challengers coming in. And how do you invest in building your future consumer base, right? So especially if you are a brand that caters to, let's say, 50 and above, at some point you have to start really focusing on millennials and Generation Z, and really investing in how do you onboard those consumers with maybe diverse products that you didn't have before, and really looking at how would they consume these products, because they have different habits in terms of how they want to even consume products and things like that. So you also have to invest in developing these products that I'm talking about, and really making sure that, again, your customer experience is on point. Then you have strategy as sort of the last and final pillar, but also the foundation of it all. So a digital first business strategy is key, and technology is no longer a tool. I think I've overflogged that already. It's a core survival strategy for your business. And it's really, really important that you really, really understand that. Strategy should touch on customer experience. It should touch on process automation. It should touch on supply chain automation as well. Now, who are the clear winners in the digital age? So when we talk about clear winners, we sort of look at brands who have invested in customer experience in the digital age. The customer calls the shots. I've mentioned that. So if you invest in your customer experience and you remove friction points, you will see that there will be a massive uptake. And one of those brands is Zappos. Amazon is another one. Monzo Bank is another one. Then also building platforms that so that you can leverage network effects, right? Zoom, Netflix, Airbnb, Uber. These are all platforms that are leveraging network effects and where the consumer is helping to build the customer base. Embed innovation in your culture. So drive innovation from every business unit through, you know, and make sure that it's not something that sits in the IT department, but really goes through all of the different departments. And Amazon and Google are excellent at doing that. Investing in your people and workplaces as well is really key. So there's no digital transformation without people. And I think that that's something that is really, really important to note. So you have to have people with the right skills, and you have to have a workplace that also allows them to collaborate. So we've seen new office designs coming into play that allow more collaboration, that allow more freedom for brainstorming, that have more whiteboards and, you know, glass that you can write on and tables you can write on, and all of those funky and fancy things. All of those are not just for fun and, you know, effigy, as we like to say. They're actually helping, you know, brands to get better and more effective and innovate and be more productive. And again, Google and Facebook are surely the innovators in that particular space. So now there are technologies that are driving digital transformation. Some of these may be a little bit where you're like, oh, really? So digital marketing is one of them, right? And that is really where that front end, you know, comes in, where you have to really look at your web development. You have to look at your social media. You have to look at your search engine optimization. You have to look at your search engine marketing strategy. You have to look at content development. Content is something that is really also shaping customer experience and shaping consumer behavior and really changing a lot of things for brands. So, you know, investing in video content, investing in content marketing and written content and all the different content types is really, really key. And also investing in your branding. So before you even go on a digital journey, right, look at your brand and ensure that your brand is 21st century proof. And when I talk about brand, I'm not just talking about your logo, but I'm talking about all your different brand touch points that form your brand identity. It's really, really key to look at all of those. Look at your messaging pillars. Look at, you know, the taglines that you have. Look at the digital channels you have. Look at your, you know, do you have cohesive branding? It's really, really important. It might seem like it has nothing to do with digital transformation, but the truth is that customer experience, UI, UX, they're all driven by amazing branding. So number 2 is emerging technology. So there's blockchain, there's AI, which is artificial intelligence, there's VR, which is virtual reality, and there's AR, which is augmented reality. These are all, you know, buzzwords that a lot of us just feel like, oh, wow, this, you know, we will never get there. But the truth is that they're already being used in many, many Nigerian businesses. And I think that especially with this shift that we're currently experiencing, there will be more and more businesses that will start looking into these emerging technologies. Nkira also touched on cloud infrastructure and, you know, having a cloud strategy and really thinking about cloud native applications. I think that for a while, we're going to have to ride a hybrid infrastructure because we've invested a lot in on-site infrastructure and local hosted infrastructure. So I think what businesses have to do is slowly transition from that into cloud, right? And also one of the areas that we have to really think about is regulation. Some of the regulators in different industries may not actually allow for a cloud-only infrastructure. So you also have to think about what are my regulators saying when you're thinking about digital transformation. Then number 4 is data analytics, where we talk about big data, we talk about business intelligence and data mining. And I think for that, you know, it's really, really important that this is at the forefront of your business. And it starts from just simple things like having a mailing list, right? In these times, Nkiru mentioned, use this time to communicate with your customer. If you haven't segmented your mailing list, if you haven't actually, put a mailing list together, you've never sent an email marketing newsletter out before, this is the time where you should really, use the time that you have now to start segmenting that data, no matter how basic it is. And if you're much more advanced than that, this is the time to really think about what are the data points, what are the metrics that I should be looking at in order to have data-driven decision-making in my organization. Then we have automation, efficiency, and productivity management tools. So these are cloud services, collaboration tools, video calling tools, e-learning tools, intranet tools, project management tools, survey tools, CRMs, ERPs, bots, etc. So these are tools that will actually help you deliver your services. They will help you also make your employee experience better. So, and they make your entire organization more efficient. And with efficiency comes, your bottom line will be smiling. So it's an area that we really have to focus on. And then the last area to focus on in terms of technologies is IT security. Having a firewall, having endpoint protection, having penetration testing, having a business continuity plan, having a disaster recovery plan, making sure that you have the right tools to detect threats and to fight them off, and to also find the root causes and to get your technology back up when you get hacked. So driving your digital transformation, the biggest part of our digital transformation is changing the way we think, and that's Simon Sinek. So what's your digital transformation persona? Are you digitally challenged? This means you have little or no understanding of digital. Are you a digital thinker? You have little direct interaction with digital, but you conceptually understand digital. Are you a digital disruptor? So this means you've been deeply embedded in digital. Are you a digital leader? You have substantial experience in running traditional businesses that leverage digital in a significant way. Or are you a digital transformer? So you've led or participated in a digital transformation of a traditional business already, right? Now, obviously, if you're digitally challenged or a digital thinker, I think that this is the time where you should really invest in, sort of stockpiling knowledge and learning more about the things that you really need to look into. And I think that this masterclass will give you a good direction of the things that you probably have gaps in, and you'll be able to then hone in on those and really focus on how do you make, how do you gain more knowledge in those areas so that you can move down and at least become. Now, who should be driving this digital transformation? So anyone driving digital transformation should grasp the potential impact of digital technologies. So should see technology as a strategic driver that is fully integrated in your overall business strategy rather than a platform or a tool. The person should have a customer-centric approach and really care about customer experience. The person should have a clear picture of the role that data plays in future-proofing your business. The person should understand the new competitive dynamics disrupting your industry, and also be able to identify competencies and behaviors needed to lead successfully in a digital age. I think that's really, really important because you may need to hire people who will help you drive this digital transformation. And if you're not really sure what type of skills they should have in order to help you, then you can run into a lot of trouble. You should also understand cybersecurity threats, risks, and vulnerabilities linked to integrating technology into your business. And again, look at risks also from a compliance point of view, and from a regulatory point of view, and ensuring that whatever it is that you're building is in line with regulation and is compliant as well. So understand, the person should also understand the interwoven nature of digital marketing and digital technologies. So I mentioned that they're like twin sisters or twin brothers. They really go hand in hand because they, digital marketing drives traffic, drives conversion, and engages the customer while digital technology delivers your services. Now, the role of a board in digital transformation should be obviously strategy, right? So a board is central to determining your corporate strategy and championing projects and investments that deliver it. So that means that digital transformation shouldn't be any different, right? And it has to be driven from the very, very top. So your board should have at least one board member who is a digital transformer and who really understands digital transformation and technology trends, right? So digital transformer was the last digital transformation persona that we had on the list. This is someone who has already driven digital transformation in an organization, in a traditional industry, and really has firsthand knowledge of points of failure, who understands the things to look out for, who understands data points and data metrics to look out for and to collect. Because this person will really be able to ensure that you're on the right track. Your board also has to engage more frequently and deeply on strategy and risk. So usually you would have annual reviews of your business strategy. In my opinion, that's not enough anymore. There's too much changing in the world, in digital, and the way that consumers are also behaving. So you really, really have to do your reviews much more frequently than you were doing before. And the board also has to understand how digital challengers can upend your business, right? And they have to be really, really proactive in challenging your management team to look out for those digital challengers and take them serious. A lot of the time, you know, both board members and board members and C-level executives, a lot of the time they sort of, you know, laugh at challenger brands and they're like, oh, but they're so small. Oh, but what can they do? Oh, but we have 90% of the market share. So what? 90% today, 0 tomorrow. Remember BlackBerry whenever you laugh at challenger brands. Okay, so we have a question here that says, in case where you don't have a digital transformer on your board, what's the next best thing? I would say the next best thing is to really rethink your board setup and to really rethink your board setup and actually add a new board member, maybe when another board member is retiring, or alternatively, make sure that you have the right, that you have a lot of digital transformers in your C-suite, right? But depending on your industry, this might also not be the case. So you have to be very, very careful, especially when you're in a traditional setting, to make sure that you have the right type of board and the right type of C-level management to lead you into the 21st century and ensure that you survive the next 10 years, because that's really what it is. It's a fight for survival in the next 10 years. So let's go over to the role of C-level executives. So a lot of the time, you know, people think, oh, it's an IT function, so it's the CTO or CIO, whatever he's called in your organization, that is going to drive this. But that's absolutely wrong. Your CEO, your COO, your CIO, your CMO, your CHRO, and your CFO must all be involved in driving digital transformation. Because it's not an IT initiative. It's an enabler for purposeful enterprise-wide transformation and innovation, which means that it is a strategic part of your business and it drives your business in a way that any other business strategy would. Traction really starts when you take hold or start to take hold when you see C-level executives collaborate and coordinate holistic digital transformation initiatives together, right? Also, a lot of the time, the CIO is not included in boardroom discussions, you know, and only called in when it's time to report on IT matters. I think that this is also a strategy that is wrong. I think your CIO has to become a strategic business partner and must be involved in business strategy development and implementation at the highest level, right? Because if he doesn't understand what the pain points in your business are, if he doesn't understand why your bottom line is suddenly falling, if he doesn't understand the business inside out, then he cannot recommend the right technology and he cannot implement a strategy that is going to win. So you really have to look at it from a holistic point of view. Everybody must collaborate. Your chief marketing officer has to work closely with your digital transformation team. So I've already sort of touched on the link between digital transformation and digital marketing. It's really, really important. Don't keep those two functions separate, because if not, there's a lot of data that marketing will sit on that the transformation team actually needs, and the data is not being shared simply because the CMO is not being involved. C-level executives have to make this transformation a top strategic priority. So it shouldn't be something like, oh yeah, we're doing digital transformation. Okay, the CIO is responsible and he'll sort it out and he'll come and give us reports. No, it has to be your own strategic priority, regardless of what C-level role you actually have. So your business outcomes also need to drive and measure digital transformation success. So you have to figure out ways of really tying your digital transformation and the metrics that you're using to measure the success to business outcomes, right? So that you can say, okay, we increased sales because we now have better data and we're able to cross-sell our products more. Or we increased adoption of a product because we've automated the sign-up process, or whatever it is, right? So you have to really, really think about how do you measure success. And you also have to remember that in as much as it's great to optimize your bottom line, it shouldn't be the only factor that drives your digital transformation. And I've seen this in a couple of organizations where, you know, they claim to have a customer-centric or customer-first approach, but when you read their strategy documents and you look at what they've implemented, you will see that all they're optimizing for is bottom line. They're not optimizing for customer experience at all, right? They are taking out friction that will allow the customer to transact more so that the customer can spend more, right? And that they make more money. And that's how they're optimizing for bottom line. This will only work for a while. If there's a challenger brand that is able to deliver at the same cost, but with better experience, your customers are gone. So you really have to think about your bottom line not being the only thing that will drive your digital transformation. Now, business owners. So this obviously always depends on sort of the size and the stage of you know, where your business is, but business owners should really understand digital transformation and technology, especially if they're involved in the day-to-day running of the business, right? As a CEO or any type of other C-level executive, or even if they sit on the board as a chairman, right? Or a board member, then they should still really understand digital transformation. So depending on size, stage, or anything, understanding digital transformation and the technologies that are out there is really, really key. And engaging frequently and deeply on strategic, on strategy and risk is also really important. Don't leave it all to your CIO and CTO. He doesn't have all the answers and he doesn't understand the business the way that you do. So it has to be something that is being developed together. You also have to understand how applications interconnect. You understand the business, so you understand what you want out of an application and how it needs to interconnect. You understand how it should be extensible in the future. So sometimes we pile up on applications. So I did a digital transformation project for a client in South Africa, and they had over 52 independent applications that were all cloud hosted, all had data all over the place. And none of them talked to each other, so there was no interoperability. They were not interconnected. You couldn't really extend them the way that they needed to. And it was a big mess, basically, you know. And the bigger and faster your organization grows, the bigger that mess will become. I spoke to someone else who was doing a similar project also in South Africa, and he was doing it for a large financial institution, and that financial institution had 387 independent applications that were all over the place, were not talking to each other, all had customer data in them. And, you know, so there are a lot of security risks that are associated with that. There are also risks associated with, okay, if you lose data in one place, you know, or if data in one place is not correct, how does it actually impact the rest of the organization? And then obviously there's legacy applications as well, which Nkiru mentioned when she was talking. And those are basically technologies that are really, really old and simply are not cloud compliant and not digital first compliant. you need to find them, you need to phase them out, and you need to make sure that you actually understand how they were set up in order to not lose any historic data. So you also have to understand where and how your applications house your data. It's really, really important, because everybody and every cloud service provider has different standards in terms of privacy, in terms of data protection, in terms of how they protect your data. If there's a data breach, you know, how quickly they will react and things like that. So it's really important to understand that. And then also understand the risks and threats that your business is actually exposed to. Your business can shut down if you have, let's say, a denial of service attack, and let's say you're running an online only e-commerce website, right? And suddenly your site is down, no one can get to it, and they keep attacking, and you just don't know how to get it back up, right? Those are real life risks, and we've seen this happen with a lot of organizations, you know, globally, and we have to learn from those things. You are going to get hacked. That's a given. It's not something that may happen. It will happen. Sometimes you get hacked and you don't even know that you've been hacked because people are just there spying. So you really have to think about what are those risks and what are those threats and what is that data that I have to protect. You also have to understand what competitors and challenger brands are doing, right? And be in tune with global trends as a whole. Now, if you have a digital consultant, or you're sort of thinking about hiring a digital consultant, because you may not have the in-house capacity to design your strategy or oversee and manage the implementation, then you should really consider finding an IT partner that can support your transformation and is able to help you conduct an IT audit, has deep understanding of your business processes and industry landscape and regulations, is able to develop strategic digital transformation plans for you, is able to select and deploy applications that can integrate into your processes seamlessly and ensure interoperability with other applications. And also who has a deep understanding of technology that you've already deployed or that you're going to deploy, and is not just focused on selling. So what I've seen a lot is that there are people who know that their application is not going to benefit you, but they just want to make a sale. And because you don't have enough knowledge, you will buy it, right? And then $1 million later, a year later, you're like, oh my God, this was the biggest fail ever. And then you have to go explain it to your board, and your board is like, why did you tell us to approve this? To the board, you didn't understand it. To the C-level executive, you didn't understand it enough. So you have to make sure that you also have the right type of partners and that you're working with the right type of people. Okay, so there's a question in terms of, could infrastructure challenges in Nigeria be a limiting factor? So if you had told me at the beginning of this year that Nigeria and the entire world is going to go remote, I would have laughed and thought that that was like the biggest joke in history. I run a technology company and, you know, my experience with remote work up till date has not been great. However, we figured out how to make it work, right? It just means that you have to think about how you provide additional infrastructure, right? The same way that if you run a telecommunications business, your base station will have 1, 2, 3, 4 backup generators, right? The same way you would also then figure out how to invest in infrastructure that you need to actually run your business and go onto this digital transformation journey. And you'd actually be surprised in terms of data centers. There are tier 3 and tier 4 data centers in Nigeria, which is cutting edge, is the same standard as everywhere else in the world. And these providers, you know, I've visited one of those data centers, and these providers, they've put in place all the standards that are global standards for data centers. So when it comes to infrastructure, you have providers that can provide the right type of infrastructure. I think that we just have to make sure as leaders that we also engage with these providers extensively to providers that we should be working with. Now let's go on to the digital transformation checklist. So we have 40% of all businesses that will die in the next 10 years. And if they don't figure out how to change the entire company to accommodate new technologies, this is what's going to happen to them basically, right? And this number seems extremely high, but from all indications and from all the big businesses that have failed over the years that have not been able to digitally transform, I actually think that this number might even be understated. So the digital transformation checklist. So the first thing you have to do is audit to define your current state. Where am I? And then also define your target state. This audit should go across processes, your existing technology, infrastructure, your network, security, strategies, consultants, applications, people that you have, your IT team, your leadership, customer centricity, and all of that. Another thing that you should do is have a customer journey mapping exercise. And this is something that is not done in a day. It's really a very extensive exercise. But what it does is it starts to show you your friction points. And it's not enough to sort of map the journey out on paper or on a whiteboard. It's really important to actually engage with customers or go through the journey yourself. How many board members, have actually gone into the brick and mortar stores of the, the companies that they sit on? How many of them have interacted with customer service on the phone? How many of them have, really done these type of spot checks that are necessary in order to really get a really holistic view of the customer journey? Then we have to dive into the strategy development. So strategy development focuses on customer centricity. So how do you optimize your product and service delivery? How do you optimize your customer service? How do you create an omni-channel experience where regardless of where I encounter your brand, the experience is the same? And how do I take out all the friction that there is? Then there's technology. So is it cloud? Is it hybrid, local hosted? Do I have an API strategy? All of those things are things that you need to look at and start thinking about. You have to think about your data and data analytics strategy. You have to think about your cybersecurity strategy. You have to think a big chunk, right? And if you remember in the C-level executive slide, there was a section that said that the CHRO has a role to play. And I didn't really go into that at that point because I want to talk about it here. Your chief HR officer, right, has a very, very key role to play when it comes to digital transformation, because the person really has to help with communication and also has to help with the change management. The person also has to look at what is the current employee experience, what is the current culture, and how does our digital first employee experience and employee culture or organizational culture look like, right? How do you maximize staff efficiency by bringing in technology and tools and creating a nicer workspace for them, and just making sure that you're actually looking at people as a very, very big part of your digital transformation. And Inkuru talked about recruiting and talent management and sort of making sure that you have the right talent. This is really, really important. Unfortunately, the talent pipeline in Nigeria is not big enough in order for us to actually get all the talent that we need, which also means that we have to really think about how do we actually engage and how do we actually help sort of sustain and help build this talent pipeline of technology talent, of data scientists, of product managers, of customer experience specialists, of chatbot specialists. How do we build this talent pipeline? Our universities are not going to help. So how can we as corporates figure out how to make sure that we always have a talent pool to pick from? And then once we have them, we have to manage them properly, because technology talent always has a much quicker turnover than other people who work in other functions. Right? Technology talent is a little bit specific and quirky, to say the least. We want something that's exciting. We want something that's challenging. We're not going to program the same boring mobile app for 2 years. So, you also need to think about how you keep them engaged and how you manage that talent properly. You also need to think about your learning and development strategy. How do you upskill your existing workforce? You constantly have boardroom discussions where people are talking about managing out legacy staff and how do you deal with legacy staff. why do they have to become legacy staff? If you have the right strategy to actually upskill them, they may not have to become legacy staff and you may not have to phase them out, right? They may be able to take on other roles if they're upskilled and reskilled. Okay, so there is a, I will go through this section first and then I'll answer Albert's question. So also in terms of your budget, you have to ensure that you also factor in future costs, right? Digital transformation is not a one-off cost because it's not a, well, let's do this once and then it's done. It's an ongoing cost and it's an investment. So you have to also eradicate double spend caused by overlap. So if you're one of those organizations that has multiple apps that all do the same thing, figure out which one is the best, which one are we going to use as an organization, stick with it, phase all of the other ones out, reduce your cost, you know, find all the overlaps and make sure that you're actually spending your budget wisely. Then after you have your strategy, you have to think about your implementation. So the approach that I recommend is design for operations, where you basically are developing and delivering your applications and the things that the technology that you're building in a way that is powered by analytics, it's lean and it's automated, and you're really building for the operational challenges that your business currently faces. And then lastly, you also have to track. So I had already mentioned in terms of tying digital transformation to success to business outcomes. So you have to audit your organization at strategic intervals, which will allow you to track your digital progress. That's really, really important. So to Albert's question, Albert asked, what would be your advice to a C-level executive who hopes to drive digital transformation in his office, but doesn't get the support from management and ExCo? So I think what I would do if I was that executive, I would present a plan that scares the executives and the board, right? Fear, I have learned, is something that makes people act fast, right? Now businesses and supermarkets, the supermarkets are empty because people are on lockdown. E-commerce front end. We need a delivery company. We need to build out our channels. And suddenly they've built something. It's not great, but they've built something. And suddenly they have the capability to deliver. They have the capability to build e-commerce. So paint the worst case scenario. Use the gaps that you've identified from this pandemic. Create a document, ask for time and present it, and present strategies and you know, plans and things that you think will help. And also present challenger brands, right? Show them what is happening in your sector, even if it's not happening in Nigeria yet. The truth is that a lot of the technology startups copy from disruptors that are in other countries. So if you work in healthcare or you work in education, you may not have seen a lot of disruption to your sector, but in other countries there has been. So using those models to actually show what is possible and show how you can optimize, I think would be the first step to get the buy-in. If at some point you feel like you're talking to a brick wall, then maybe you need to change your job, right? Because you also have to think about, you want to be in a company that's alive in 10 years and not a company that's dead. And so if you've tried and you've got deaf ears, my advice would be move on and figure out a company that actually wants to go on a digital transformation journey. So what are the key points of failure? So there's no alternative to digital transformation. Visionary companies will carve out new strategic options for themselves. Those that don't adapt will fail. And that's from Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. Okay, Bimbola Wright also added to the response, Albert. So maybe you can also, you know, sort of understand what their fears and concerns are. So I think that that's also really important. Sometimes, you know, management just don't understand it. And because they don't understand it, it scares them. And because it's not something that, oh, they need it right now, it always gets pushed on the back burner. We don't like to do the things that we're afraid of and that we don't really understand. And sometimes it's a financial issue. Sometimes we don't think that we can afford it. And, you know, we also look at digital transformation as a cost point as opposed to looking at it as an investment. So let's look at the points of failure. So there's lack of board and C-level buy-in. And this is really what Albert was asking, right? So this is the most common point of failure, where either your board or your C-level isn't bought in properly, where there's a lack of collaboration in the C-suite, and that's why the project is failing. And also where the board and both C-level don't see digital transformation as an investment and simply see it as a cost center. Cheap is expensive. This is really my favorite saying. And, you know, like everything in life, when you get something cheap, it usually turns out more expensive than if you had bought the more expensive item. So don't save on your technology. That is really the last part you should be skimping on. It is an investment. It is what will take you into the future. It is what will keep your business alive. It is the core and the foundation of every single business in the 21st century. So you have to invest in it. And you have to see it as an investment and business growth strategy. So digital transformation efforts, as I said, a lot of people view them as cost centers, but they are actual investments. And we have to change that perception. So leadership teams need to have return on investment metrics and ways to tie innovation projects to business outcomes, right? Because once you can see the success, you will become the biggest proponent, and success a lot of the time has to be bottom line success or better customer adoption or you know, increased customer loyalty or whatever you want to use to measure your success. But if leadership teams don't have those return on investment metrics, and they don't really have ways to tie what you're doing to innovation project to the business outcomes, then it's really, really hard for them to actually change their perception and start seeing it as an investment. The minute that there is success, no matter how small, you will see that your board, your leadership team will jump on it and will say, how can we do more? Sometimes it also happens when challenger brands or competitors do something and you see their annual report and you're like, wow, we've missed out. We need to go and start doing this as well. Change management is really, really important. So making sure that everyone is carried along can really save you a lot of money. So I was once called into an IT audit for a company that had invested $1 million into bringing in an ERP system. And then they said, oh, but it's not working. And the consultant is somewhere in Europe, and to fly them in was $10,000. So they wanted the opinion of a local company to come and audit it. And I said, okay, I'm not going to do an actual systems audit because I don't think that there's anything wrong with the system. They said, no, the system is not working. I said, yes, okay, that's fine. Let me talk to your people. So I had interviews with some of the people, and as I was talking to the people, I realized that they were never carried along. Management made a decision, management paid the money to bring in this system, they deployed, they implemented, nobody was carried along. The processes were not analyzed properly, and the system simply did not fit the business. It was the wrong system. So when I found that out, I said to the management, I said, you guys bought the wrong system. And they said, how can that be? The consultant is a global consultant and this and that. And I said, yes, but it doesn't fit your processes. These are the things that your people said. If you had talked to your people, you would have known that this system is not the ideal fit, or the system needs to be customized. So at that point, they had the choice of scrapping it and writing it off as a $1 million mistake, or spending more to rectify that mistake, right? So change management is really, really important, and carrying everyone along and ensuring that your people actually understand the digital transformation vision and also the strategy behind it. And Nkiru mentioned a really important point. There's a lot of fear on the employee side that is affiliated with digital transformation and automation. You know, when we talk about the future of work, everybody's always like, I'm gonna lose my job. Chances are you're not going to lose your job. Chances are your job will simply stop existing, but chances are that your job is going to evolve into a different job function, right? And I think that communicating that and showing people what the options are and showing people how they can still continue to add value in your organization is really important. This is where the chief HR officer will really come in. And then also ensuring that you involve teams in process mapping and application and technology selection. So that's the example that I gave. And be strict when introducing new systems. Be a role model. You can't say everybody is going to use, I don't know, a project management tool, and then you're the only one that keeps asking people for updates on WhatsApp. It will not work. Nobody will go in and fill in the data on the project management tool simply because you're not doing it. So it's important as leaders to also make sure that we embrace the technology and follow the rules that we've sort of set up. Okay, so there's another comment just to add to your and concerns are, it'd be useful to ring fence the key internal resources in a digital transformation project from BAU. Well, so I think ring fencing sometimes gives you very isolated results, and it may work when you are, maybe it can work in product development when you're trying to go to market with a new product that is almost like a diffusion line, or you diversifying your product lines, and it can live separately because it's almost like a separate company. So I've seen that in a couple of companies that have sort of attempted to stay relevant by cannibalizing their own customers with a solution that is more innovative, and then sort of slowly pivoting into a new way of doing business. So I've seen that work, but I think that approach is also, it can fail in so many ways. And I also think that when you sort of separate digital transformation from your business, then it's no longer digital transformation, then it becomes a technology project that you're doing to build a specific solution. Okay, having support is also important. And this time we're talking about technology support. So you have to make sure that you have the right IT support services. Technology without support is a big no-no. This support should be available locally. We have enough capabilities. You don't need a global consultant that has to fly in to fix your little CRM that you have, or something like that. So I think we really have to think about how do we ensure that we have as much local support as possible. Obviously there are solutions that might be core to your industry that are simply foreign because there's no Nigerian equivalent and there's no Nigerian and local support. Then obviously you have to sort of think about what the solutions are around that. Look at the SLAs that you're signing that focus on support services for your applications. Make sure that you have upgrades and updates included in these SLAs and in the yearly cost that you are paying, as opposed to sort of having your SLAs sort of like, oh, that's just for support, but then when you want to actually upgrade your system, suddenly you have to pay a hefty fee. And I've seen that, and there's no reason for that. And those are little tricks that technology vendors will put in simply to make sure that they make more money, right? Everybody's growing their bottom line. Technology vendors are too. So you have to also understand the modalities of your support agreement properly. Calculate cost of support when your organization scales. So sometimes support cost is very little when we have 100 people, but when we suddenly grow to 1,000 people, suddenly the support cost is astronomical and unaffordable. So we also have to look at the cost of the future and not just cost of today in order to really understand how to manage your support costs. So get your workforce 21st century ready. A big point of failure is people. Technology may change every 5 seconds, but your people don't. So you have to upskill them. You have to train them continuously. You have to bring in an integrated learning management system, or make available Udemy for Business, LinkedIn Learning, Coursera. They all have business applications that have managers at the back end where your team managers and line managers are able to assign courses to their direct reports, and HR can oversee all of it, and these assessments that come out of those trainings then go into performance review. And obviously digital skill training should be core competencies. No one in your organization should not have any digital skills. Are you also investing in the right talent? Do you have succession planning? So sometimes because there are not that many technology talents in the country, we also get scared and we're like, oh my God, I have to keep this guy because he's, the best. And if I lose him, I'm, going to die. Build talent so that you don't have to think about, I'm going to die just because this person has, sort of gone somewhere else. What are you doing to mitigate against high turnover of technology staff, right? So a lot of technology staff is migrating, well, not at the moment, but was migrating last year off to Canada, off to Estonia, off to Germany, off to the UK. What does that mean for your organization, right? You have to invest in the talent pipeline in order to ensure that you currently have new talent. And you also have to create workspaces that are, and work environments that are acceptable by technology staff. If I'm coming from a cool company like Google, where I can sit on a beanbag and in my jeans and t-shirt and write my code, I'm not gonna come to work in a suit, no matter how much you pay me, right? I will tell you that I will come in jeans and t-shirts. So if you want me, you'll hire me like that. So you also have to rethink your organizational culture, no matter how corporate your organization is. You need to rethink the spaces that you have in your organization and ensure that they're innovative, that they foster collaboration, like I mentioned earlier. Data is also a very big point of failure. So if all your data was gone today when you woke up, what would you have done, right? How would you have felt? You'd probably not be on this webinar at the moment. Data is the new gold. Without it, you're nothing. So you have to start acting like it. You have to collect data points. You have to build institutional knowledge. You have to have a list of your critical data and where it is housed and the risks it's exposed to, so that you can really understand what type of things you have to put in place to make sure that you have everything in place to protect your data. You have to have rules around data processing, data entry, data transfer, data retention, to ensure that you also have clean and useful data. So I was working with an organization, and they were 10 years old, and they had data everywhere in different places, and it was really, really messy. And they had to actually create a unit that took all this data, first of all, try to synchronize it, and then cleaned it. And these people were cleaning data for a year in order to get a clean data set, and to get data that they could actually use for decision making, and data that they could use for presentations and things like that. Don't let that be you, right? Make sure that you train your staff around data processing, data entry management, data transfer and retention, and also make sure that your systems are set up with rules where there are checks and there are validations and all sorts of different things that prevent bad and wrong data to go in, because as they say in tech, trash in, trash out, right? So whatever you put in is what you're going to get out. Now, one of the other points of failure is that we don't like to document. In a digital transformation, it is really, really important that you document like your life. Policies, your processes, your procedures, all of them should live in documents, and you should have a playbook and a policy for everything. And as you transform, don't forget to also update existing policies and processes and procedures accordingly. Develop standards if you need to develop new ones, update them as technology changes, and make sure that they're well documented. And then also let your people imbibe and stick to your processes and policies. So that implementation part of the policies is another area where the HR, chief HR officer will really come into play to make sure that those processes and policies are followed, and that there are also, penalties and disincentives for not following them. Think about business continuity. A lot of the time, we bring in technology and we're not thinking about business continuity. Are you set up to run your entire operations remotely, right? I think COVID really challenged business continuity for a lot of us. Do you have disaster recovery and business continuity plans in place? Do you have offsite data recovery? There's so many questions around this. What are the biggest technology related risks that you're facing? How do you assess, mitigate, and keep track of those risks? Those are things that you have to think of when you're doing your digital transformation plan. And a lot of the time, this is one point that is completely overlooked, and then it becomes a point of failure. Think about your data and IT security risk. You will get hacked. I've said that before. So what is your response plan? What rules do you have around downtime? How do you ensure vendor SLAs align with your internal KPIs, right? So you may tell your customer and have a customer promise that we will have 99% uptime, yet your vendor only guarantees 80% uptime. So it won't work, right? Because your vendor will say, well, but we told you, signed the agreement, it says 80% uptime, that's what we've provided. So, you know, and then you lose loyal customers simply because you didn't read your SLAs properly and you didn't ensure that your SLAs actually align with the internal KPIs that you have. And then also, have you conducted a vendor risk and supply chain risk assessment, right? So what are the risks that the vendor faces? How robust is the company of that vendor? If something happens, are they able to deliver service? If something happens, you know, do they have the balance sheet to, you know, pay damages or whatever it is, right? All of those things are really, really important. And then also, have you ever conducted penetration testing and vulnerability scans on your applications? Those are questions that you should really, really ask yourself. And these are things that you should be doing periodically depending on what type of operations you have. And then do you know the IT security status of all your digital assets? And then one other question you should ask yourself, are people your biggest IT security risk? So what I found is that in most organizations, people actually are the biggest risk because the CIO puts a lot of work into making sure that all other risks are mitigated, all threats are being handled by different types of applications. But then you have this one guy that clicks on an email that looks like an email from the CEO, but is not an email from the CEO. And if he had just clicked into the email send or recipient box, he would have seen that it was from Nkem or whoever the hacker is. And he would have not clicked on the link. And when he clicked on the link, you know, it basically took his password. It allowed the hacker to have access to his inbox. And there are so many, you know, and when the hacker got access to his inbox, he sent a request for $1 million to be transferred somewhere to finance. Finance transferred the money, and that's $1 million gone, right? Simply by someone clicking on an email. And this is something that actually happened in an organization in the US last year. And it's something that a lot of hackers and people who are phishing for information and for data are deploying, where they're masking emails as organizational emails from leadership in order to get access and contact details. You all should also think about documenting incidents and finding the root cause so that they don't happen again, right? And obviously fixing it and doing the right, having the right governance in place as well. And also figuring out, like, how do you actually rationalize your cybersecurity spend? How valuable is it what you're protecting? How much should you spend? Do you have overlapping applications? A lot of the cybersecurity applications do similar things. So is there one that can do all of the things that you need it to do? Or are there basically just, you know, or do you have to have all these 5 applications that your CIO has to bring? You have to remember your CIO is like a little big kid in a candy shop when he is able to say, oh, I want this, I want this, I want that. And so it's important for board members, for CEOs, other C-level executives, CFOs to scrutinize technology spend, but also make sure that you're not skimping at it, because cheap is expensive, as I mentioned earlier. So what next? So you have to obviously think about your digital transformation journey. You have to engage your team and craft your vision. You have to start working on your digital transformation strategy. Then you have to implement, transform. And after that, you have to optimize. The journey will never end. But the future is digital and the future is now. And that brings me to questions. There's no knowledge that is not power. So please ask any questions that you may have. Okay, Fabian, I've unmuted you. You have a question. You raised your hand.
Yes, thank you very much, Kem, and thanks to your sister for the deep insights on digital transformation. Very well informative. My question would just be that I think that it's obvious now that if you were digitally challenged, you have to move beyond that. And for some of us in the different grades, whether thinkers or leaders, we know that this is a continuous learning we need to improve on. Mm-hmm. My question would be on how one should adapt digital transformation, particularly in the era where it looks like the COVID thing is highlighted, the need to think differently and work differently during and post this era. Would this be something that you'll see massive investments into CapEx, or would it just be consulting and looking at different ways of doing things? And would this be something that Futuresoft is able to provide some of us on this forum? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Okay, so in terms of how you should think about your digital transformation and what has changed, I think the main thing that has changed is that we just have to really think about how do we accelerate our digital transformation, and how do we make sure that we adopt our strategies to the new realities. So there may be things that we had on our digital transformation strategy list and project plan that are brought forward, right? There may be things that we have now that are no longer relevant because we've now seen that those investing in those areas will not actually help us in the immediate. So I think really reviewing your strategy and reviewing the current situation, it's because there are two things, right? So on one hand, there is the COVID situation, and on the other hand, there is the falling Naira. Which means that if you have heavy investments that you need to make that are dollar denominated, you're going to run into a lot of problems. So you also have to look at how are there local vendors that you can pay in Naira. How do you hedge your the cost of your technology, and how do you really make sure that, because for a lot of businesses, this period also means no income. It means that you are not earning, or earning much less than you were earning before, which means that you're struggling with payroll, you're struggling with keeping the lights on in your business. So you don't have the money to really invest in technology, but I think that these are also the times where you have to really think about, is this the time where maybe I need to raise money to invest in my technology journey and my digital transformation? In terms of, are we going to see heavy, CapEx investments? I think it depends on the industry. I think it depends on where you are on your journey. But the first step would be to reevaluate your strategy and to really look very deeply into, how do I need to reposition myself to win in a post-COVID world? Because let's assume this goes on till the end of June, right? And there are many speculations around, how long this will take. But if we assume that it will go on till the end of June, that's Q1 gone, Q2 gone. So you have Q3 and Q4 to sort of play catch up, to get back on your feet, to really rethink. I think a lot of businesses will probably really go out of business this year. But I also think a lot of businesses will come out of this year much stronger. But in order to come out much stronger, this is the time to really reevaluate your processes, really evaluate your strategies, look at what do you need to bring forward, what do you need to put on hold, what are the things that are really, really critical in delivering better customer experience, in engaging your customers, and things like that. So I think it's really business to business, it will be different. In terms of consulting services, yes, we do offer consulting services. So we offer digital transformation consultancy services. We help you develop, so we can do IT audits. We help you also with your strategy development, developing your implementation plan, developing your budget around it. We help you with vendor sourcing. The one thing that we don't do is the actual implementation, but we can project manage the implementation. And I've seen that sometimes really helps to have someone who is on your side and on your team that can manage your technology vendors, so that you don't have vendors who are just there to sell, and who don't deliver the right results, and who put SLAs on the table that are simply not acceptable. But unless you really understand technology, you may not understand what the different clauses mean. And, even as a lawyer, if you have an in-house legal counsel that's reviewing these documents, they may not understand technology in depth enough to really understand what some of those clauses mean when it comes to the actual execution of them, right? And I've seen that happening a lot, where the customer in the end loses out simply because the legal wasn't done, properly. So I think that's also an area for, law firms to really jump on technology law and really look at how can they help businesses, make sure that they have the right legal frameworks, the right SLAs, in place to make sure, and also non-disclosure agreements, right? So this is something that a lot of businesses overlook. They start talking to a consultant, the consultant has all the information, but you never got them to sign any confidentiality clause, or a non-compete, or that they can't steal your data. A lot of those things happen all the time, right? Where people they're like, oh yeah, I have the client list from this business. And you're like, how did you get it? Oh, well, they didn't sign anything, so I just took it. Not everybody is, super honest. So having the right legal framework, I think, is also really important in your journey. Okay, so there's a question. I hope that answers your question, Fabian. Oh, sorry, wait, I need to unmute you.
Yes, it does, Ken. Thanks very much.
Okay,
appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Ronke, I've just unmuted you. You had a question. You've raised your hand as well.
Yes, I just wanted to find out, Nigeria is wholly dependent on platforms that exist outside the country and the continent. So for example, if Netflix or Google or whatever had an overload on their side of town, we'd be the first ones to get the worst quality or even get switched off. So yes. How do we build a digital transformation or strategy based on such conditions that we're not even in control of?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is a point that is, has been on my mind ever since this entire, pandemic started. And the day that I tried to load Google Sheets and, it was saying it couldn't load, I panicked. I called one of my friends. I'm like, load Google Sheets, try and see what's going on. And he couldn't load either. And then I was like, oh my God, we're screwed. Everything is going to collapse. And that is just like one tool that I use, but I use it every single day, right? And this, for me, has really brought up the need for us to invest in technology businesses that are building platforms, technology businesses that are, trying to come up and build these type of applications that our businesses depend on. So I think sometimes we also have to, especially if we're big organizations, we have to think about how do we become independent in terms of our country, right? In terms of being able to have locally hosted solutions, whether they will still be hosted on the cloud, but in data centers. And how do we make sure that we actually grow the technology ecosystem so that the ecosystem becomes self-sustainable? But obviously this is more of a, investment and technology strategy debate that also I think has to be driven by government, has to be driven by policies, has to be driven by incentives, where we are strategically following a specific digital transformation roadmap as a nation, So I think as companies, there's not much you can do. You can start building your own in-house applications, but obviously most of the time the market is very, very long for those type of applications. So they're not going to be available overnight. So I think it's different things, basically. There's no like straightforward answer. I hope that sort of answers your question a little bit.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Okay, Bimbola, right, you also had a question. You raised your hand. I've unmuted you. Or no, I haven't. Sorry. Now I've unmuted you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nkem. Great insights from the two sisters. Now, I'm just wondering, any current digital transformations project or strategy, to what extent should it include the 5G technology, which, you know, seems to be the new reality?
So I think in terms of 5G, the infrastructure doesn't exist in Nigeria yet. However, I think at some point it will. I think that, you know, probably in the next 2 years, we're going to see a rollout of 5G. I think from what I read, NCC has not given out any licenses, but there are some tests that MTN is carrying out to just sort of see how the existing infrastructure can be, I guess, upgraded in order to carry 5G. I think 5G brings a lot of, brings a lot of opportunities and unlocks a lot of potential for technology in terms of allowing devices to be connected, right? So you have more smart devices, you have sensors, we would be able to drive smart cities. So I think when we're planning our strategies, we have to remember that 5G is not 10 years away. It's 1 or 2 years away. So it's still short to medium term and has to definitely play a very relevant role in how we think about our strategies, how we think about our products, how we actually build our products out, right? All the new devices that you're buying, the new iPhone, new computers, they all already have chips that are compliant with 5G. Storage is going to become a big issue with 5G because you will be able to download things much faster. So in 2018, I spoke on a panel in South Korea, and one of the their biggest telco networks, the CEO was on that panel, and he, you know, made a comparison, and he said you can download the entire library and archives of the United States with 5G in 3 minutes. And he said, speed is no longer going to be our issue. It will be storage, because where do you put that? Because it's so big. And he said that we will have to rethink how devices are structured. We will have to rethink how storage is restructured in our organizations. We will have much more data because we're connected to many, many more data points. So I think it's really about thinking about how do you, you know, sort of start thinking about that evolution of technology and evolution of where speed of the internet is going and what that actually brings with it, and challenges around security, challenges around you know, ethics and stuff like that are things that I think everybody should start at least thinking about, you know, and then you can build them into your strategy as you go along. This is also one of the reasons why I'd said that you must review your strategy as frequently as possible and not just leave it to, oh, let's do it once a year. I hope that answers the question. Okay, then there was another question from Nikkei here. Retail has been affected heavily by COVID. What advice would you give in terms of upgrading digital technology beyond traditional e-commerce websites? Yeah, I mean, this is really, really tough because in Nigeria, I think we're facing two different problems, right? So there, on one hand, there is not businesses that haven't really invested in their technology infrastructure. And then on the other hand, it's also government not necessarily thinking through this lockdown properly and what it actually means for businesses. And the fact that especially retail businesses will be the most impacted, and how retail businesses should be given permits to do deliveries and to move around, for their staff to come in, even if it's on a skeletal basis. So I think that, you know, part of it is really engaging government and having policies around these type of scenarios, so that in future, if this happens again, there are better chances for you to actually still earn. And then on the other hand, I also think that, so beyond investing in your e-commerce, I think you can invest in building your brand. I think this is really the time where you have to invest in, so if you can't sell because of delivery issues, because of all these different restrictions, you can't get your people to work and stuff like that, then this is the time to invest in your brand. And as I said earlier as well, this is also the time to review your processes and really look at how can you, you know, optimize your processes using technology, and how can you, you know, figure out ways of automating, you know, your value chain as much as possible, right? If you had self-baking ovens. I don't know if they exist, but if there was something where you put the dough, you prepare the dough, and then you put the dough in, and then it all comes out the way that it's supposed to be kneaded and in the shapes and forms that you need, then you would probably need 1 or 2 people to operate your operations, as opposed to having to have 20 or 30 people. So automation is not just technology, but it can also be, machine-driven automation and what you can do with those type of things. I hope that somewhat answers your question. Are there any other questions? Okay, so if there are no other questions, I would like to thank you, all of you, for staying with me for these 2 hours. I am really, really grateful, and I hope that this has been useful, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have. Oh, there's one more question here. Okay, I have unmuted you. You had a question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, super. So my question is, from a fashion retail perspective, do you see an increase in online shopping, given the issues that exist today with the difficulties with warehousing and logistics? Do you still see that after COVID-19, there's a possibility of an increase in online shopping from a retail perspective?
Yeah, so I think that
fashion retail.
Yeah, so I think that it may take some time for fashion retail to pick up, but and the reason why is more from a perspective of, especially people who have either been laid off or are currently on 50% salaries, or who are not earning what they used to be earning. They don't actually have that disposable income. But then on the other side, I do think that with the changing changes in customer behavior, there will be a higher demand of customers saying, I want to buy this product and I want to buy it online. And I think that this is the time to really start building those platforms for the time when people have enough disposable income again to buy items that are nice to haves and not necessarily must haves. Because I think after COVID-19, we are going to plunge into a deep recession, and then only must have products will be products that will really sell. Nice to have products will be for people who maybe made a win during COVID or can afford it.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, John, you have a question. I've unmuted you.
Okay, yes. I was going to read a question from the question section. So we had a chat from Nike Majekodumi. So she has said retail
we have
has
like 2 minutes left on our time, I think.
Okay, we'll do this very fast. So retail has been affected heavily by COVID. What advice would you give in terms of upgrading digital technologies beyond the traditional e-commerce website?
Yeah, I answered that question already.
Okay. And we also have a new one. How can a construction company really digitalize? Okay, there are more questions coming on here. So I think we may need to answer these some other time if we don't. But can you say anything on the construction one?
In terms of the construction one, so I think it's more of digitalizing your operations, digitalizing your supply chain and supply chain management, how you interact with your vendors, how you interact with your customers, right? Do I need to come to site to see the progress that you've made on the house that you're building for me? Or is there a way for a digital virtual walkthrough? So there are many, many ways that you can actually enhance the customer experience. And when you do your customer experience mapping, you will start seeing opportunities that you can actually bring digital in. And when you sort of map your back-end operations, you'll also see additional information on how to how the key areas that you should be focusing on in order to really digitalize, and you'll see the points that will stand out. Talking to your customers, talking to your vendors, talking to your suppliers, those are the key things that will point you in the right direction.
Okay, that's it. Just let everybody know that we're going to have the replay available. So there are comments asking if there's going to be a replay available.
Yes, we will. We have been recording this session, And once we've been able to sort of set it up and download it, we will make it available, and we'll also make the slides available to people who were in the session and who had signed up but couldn't make the session, so that everybody has access to them and can refer to them.
Okay.
Yes,
so
I'm going to share the slides. There's another one, how can a church optimize digital transformation in the new world? So I think we're already seeing this happen, right? The services being live streamed. We're seeing, you know, collections being done online. So I think that there are many, many ways for churches to really go online and harness. You know, and I think that there are a lot of apps already, Bible.com app, and, you know, there are many apps that really engage people. So it's again, it's about customer experience, and it's about how do you really optimize that customer experience. Okay, I'm glad that everybody found the session so insightful. I'm just trying to scroll through the questions. Okay, I think I've gone through all the questions, and there are no other questions currently. So I think this will be the end of it. As I mentioned, we're going to have a summary, and we're going to send out the recording of this so that you can watch it again and share it with other board members and executives that may benefit from this as well. Thank you so much for you know, spending 2 hours with me. I am absolutely grateful, and I'm very, very happy. Thank you.